Please do responsibly. If you feel you're getting ill, isolate at home and chill. No, you're not alone. Please pick up your phone and call 206-477-3977. King County 206-477-3977. Public Health 206-477-3977. King County 206-477-3977. Public Health Community Radio Station will provide you with more information. Say Rainier Avenue Radio. Your community radio station will provide you with more information. Rainier Avenue Radio.
Lock in fresh juice with the newest hip-hop and R&B.
Every Wednesday night from 9 to 11 p.m.
on Rainier Avenue Radio.
You know we got the dopest artists rocking with us every single week. It's myself, D-Money.
Taylor Hart.
And Pint-Sized Patron. This is Fresh Juice every Wednesday. It's Trilltopia.
This is the news on Rainier Avenue Radio.
The Justice Department filed a lawsuit against Walmart, alleging that the retail giant unlawfully dispensed controlled substances from pharmacies that operated nationwide. Per NPR, the government says that between the actions of the company's pharmacies and its distribution centers, Walmart helped fuel America's ongoing opioid crisis. The complaint alleges that Walmart violated the Controlled Substances Act in multiple ways as the operator of both pharmacies and wholesale drug distribution centers. At its pharmacies, Walmart is alleged to have knowingly filed thousands of controlled substance prescriptions that were not issued for legitimate medical purposes. And at its distribution centers, the government says Walmart received hundreds of thousands of suspicious orders that it failed to report to the Drug Enforcement Administration as required. If the retailer is found liable in the case, it could face civil penalties of up to $67,627 for each unlawful prescription filled and $15,691 for each suspicious order not reported.
And that's your news on Rainier Avenue Radio.
Rainier Avenue Radio.world is your 24/7 digital media hub. Tune in at Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and TuneIn apps.
It's just different.
Welcome to The Sentiment, a thought-provoking show with discussions that consist of life's experiences. We are bringing thoughts and perspectives out of captivity and isolation into spaces that promote awareness, healing, restores hope, and proclaims victory in everyday thinking and living. Come sip with me. Good evening, you all. Welcome back to The Sentiment. It is I, Latrice Donahue. And today, this episode, we are discussing mental health. We are discussing trauma, transition, and self-actualization with the absolute amazing, brilliant Dr. Chalon Ervin of Renewal of the Mind Psychological Services. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Chalon.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I also want to let you all know that you are listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. And if you want to call in and tune in at any time, you are welcome to do so at 206-290-9685. So, Chalon, tell us a little bit. I want to hear more about Renewal of the Mind to start.
Okay, well, Renewal of the Mind was my private practice that was birthed in a lot of thought and prayer. It had been on my heart for a while, but I was ignoring, like Jonah, like that's not what I'm supposed to do. But it remains with me, and it was birthed out of what I saw so many people struggling with and wanting to normalize mental health, because I think that is a big issue, is that we don't realize how many people struggle with mental health because it's a hush-hush topic. So bringing awareness to the community and allowing people to live in their true essence, achieve their optimal health and wellness through liberating themselves from the mental barriers that keep them back.
Absolutely. This is exactly the reason why I wanted to make certain to have mental health as a episode more than on one occasion. I'm hoping to have it a series in the future and have more people who are struggling with mental health to come on and share their stories and share their voices as well. It is very imperative that we continue to promote mental wellness in our communities. So like you said, it's not a stigma. It becomes a part of their self-care and a part of their way of life. We know mental health is includes our emotional and social and physical and psychological well-being, and it affects how we respond to life and our choices and our experiences. So it's very important that we have a healthy thought garden. That's what I would call it, a healthy thought garden. I do want to jump into some questions because it is important and a lot of people don't know where to start. I would like to talk about, if you can elaborate a little bit on when they're looking for a mental health professional or a mental health counselor, what should they consider?
The first thing I say is goodness of fit. Just because someone is a mental health expert or a mental health clinician may not be the fit for you. So you want to think about who you'd be comfortable speaking with, who is going to help you grow. You also want to think about maybe some cultural understandings, and because that's a very important part of who your identity is and who you will connect with. So while a therapist may have skills and their work may be effective, their work will not be effective if you're not connected to them. So you want to make sure that there is a good connection. And sometimes you start with someone and you realize maybe they're not a good fit or you've outgrown where they can take you. It's totally okay to find other therapists and to move forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Chalon, what are you sipping this evening? How dare I forget to ask?
Oh, thank you for asking. I have some nice mint tea. Keeps me calm.
Oh, I'm peppermint tea as well.
Okay.
Yes. You know what's interesting? And I don't know if you've heard it, but I read something some time ago that there's amino acids in tea, and certain types of tea and post that specifically aid in helping with anxiety and stress and depression and all of those things, which, you know, I understand chamomile and like lavender and peppermint tea and all of those, but green tea, green tea was actually extremely beneficial to reducing symptoms of mental health, which I thought was very interesting.
So much is connected to your gut and what you consume. So like I always like to take the approach of holistic health, because sometimes people will focus on one aspect and then wonder why they don't feel healthy. So if you're just focusing on your physical, you also need to have the other components because you're a holistic being.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about your approach and your theory. I know one of the things that I read is you deal with, which is part of the topic, transition during traumatic times or crisis and traumatic experiences. And then what I really loved about your theory and your approach was you mentioned self-actualization.
Yes.
And that is huge. One of the things I was really curious about is when people are in the mode of trauma or in the mode of transition, how do you approach that piece of self-actualization when there are other needs? Because if I remember correctly, it's a part of like Maslow's hierarchy. So their basic needs, their emotional, their social needs, like when everything is in turmoil, let's say they're homeless or, you know, whatever the case is, how do you operate around that? Or do you focus on those other things first?
You focus on the other things first. So just like you stated, it is part of Maslow's hierarchy. Self-actualization is near the top. There also is one other layer that's often not discussed, but I'll start with the bottom layers. First, you have safety. So that's having basic security. So what you were mentioning, where many people who have experienced trauma, who are in transition, their safety is in question. And individuals who've experienced trauma, oftentimes due to how our brains are wired, they're stuck in safety. So until that is acknowledged, it's hard for them to reach the other levels, such as love and belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. So safety is where you want to start. And I always believe in meeting the client where they are, because if you're trying to take them where they're not ready to go, you're not going to do anything that's going to be beneficial, and it can actually be harmful.
Absolutely. That is awesome to hear. In having discussions just in the field that I'm from, part of my field, and you don't get many case managers even, or counselors who address safety, address those basic needs first. And it's a little interesting. There's so much going on right now, even with Renton City Council, and trying to do away in the next 6 months or so with one of the hoteling situations that they have for some homeless people that are housed, and their community members, some that are saying we need this, and there's other that are saying, they need to be there. You can't address their mental health and the substance use until they have a roof over their heads and a safe place to be. And so it seems like there's a disconnect where people aren't understanding how important safety and shelter is. And so it's baffling. It's not a human-centered concept. And so it's very dehumanizing. And so it's kind of frustrating when you're sitting in those spaces and like, what are you talking about? So it's very refreshing to hear that is very, you take a very holistic approach. You don't disregard the fact that safety and shelter and getting them out of that crisis moment is very important.
One more thing that I think I should mention, well, the last level is intrinsic value, which is about true goodness and a level of perfection. So it's about striving to get there. Most people do not get there because it is about the journey, not the destination. And one more piece to that is recognizing how people cope. So I don't believe in good or bad coping. I believe in healthy and unhealthy coping. So before you remove somebody's coping strategy, you need to understand what it serves so that you can add something in place, because that can be also dangerous of taking someone's coping away and not replacing it with something healthy.
Oh, I'll sip to that. Girl.
Cute cat too.
That's good. That is good. I appreciate you. You're so awesome. It's so important. It's so important. And I hope that people are tuned in. We have a beautiful Black woman who is brilliant minded, who is God-centered, who is focused on human-centered design and knows what she's talking about and knows what she's doing. And a lot of times it's hard for people to find psychologists, especially in this region, that are culturally with it and know what's up, right? So I sure hope that you all are listening and taking notes. So I'm not sure how this next question will be answered, in the sense that I'm not certain if it can be, because there are so, with the DSM, now there's a spectrum of mental health illnesses and symptoms and so forth. For families and those who may be struggling with someone who does have mental health issues or are displaying some behaviors of mental health, how do you advise, or are there any resources for families that might say, hey, you know what? I think my loved one may be struggling, or a friend that may say, you know what, my friend's been a little bit off. I'm not certain what's going on with her, but I'm really concerned. Or someone who's saying, you know what, I realize that I'm totally not myself right now, and I'm concerned, but maybe afraid and not knowing where to get assistance. What advice or resources may you have for them?
Well, first, I'd like to say that every mental disorder, even if it is the same diagnosed mental disorder, is going to manifest itself differently in each person, and there's going to be varying levels of intensity. So many mental health issues, as I like to see them, are just adaptive responses to adversity. So some of those may be psychological, some of them may be biological, and some of them may be environmental. So one thing that people can recognize, or even loved ones and families can recognize in people, is any shifts in their behavior, and prolonged shifts, because of course, when life happens, you're going to have a shift, but if it's a prolonged shift, and the next part is, how is it impairing their life? Because in order for it to be a disorder, it has to have some degree of impairment.
Okay.
So looking at moodiness, sudden or unusual changes in their behavior, extreme sensitivity, lots of emotion or lack of emotion, fatigue, all of these can be signs, but you also want to look at them in clusters, because in order for it to be a disorder, it has to be clustered with a certain number of them. So
Okay.
any change you want to, of course, not address, but not go in too hard, because some people are not ready for it. And I
Right.
think what we do is we try to fix people.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't fix anybody. Like, some of these responses that people have are normal responses to abnormal things in the environment. Like 2020 has been a crazy year for many.
Yes.
If you're not responding in a way that's different than how you may have in 2019, you may want to say, well, why? So it's the prolonged, and what is it that is triggering this individual to behave in this way? So some of the resources, of course, especially for clinicians of color, there is a directory called Clinicians of Color in Private Practice online, where they can look up in various regions and see people's pictures, see what theoretical orientation they have. There's a multicultural one here in Seattle. If you type in multicultural counselors, it'll pop up. Psychology Today is also a good start. So there's so many resources online, and many of the clinicians now are offering consults, free consults, so that you can determine if they're a good fit for you.
Sounds good. So we have Psychology Today, we have Clinicians of Color, and what was
multicultural counselors. And I would be remiss if I did not mention the Washington Therapy Fund, which Ashley McGirt started. It's for people who are local, specifically for Black people who may not have access to therapy because cost is a barrier. So you can sign up and you can get a scholarship to have your first initial sessions covered. And I just think it's a good resource, because many people, they either say they don't have time or they don't have the money for it, but that does not have to be an excuse for getting healing.
Yes, it does not. And let's repeat that one more time.
The WA Therapy Fund, so WA Therapy Fund.
Okay.
And type it in and you'll get all the information. And if you have questions, you can also ask me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. That is huge. Chalon, I wanted to give an opportunity for people to call in if they had specific questions regarding mental health or anything around mental health. And also, if you're up for it, if we do have anyone that calls in, we can offer words of encouragement or empowerment or even prayer if they like. So if that's something that you're up for, if that happens, I did want to put that out there, that you are more than welcome to join in. So for young people, Chalon, and I'm talking youth and young adults, maybe ages 12 to 24 or and younger. How does that behavior manifest? Because what I'm hearing is that, and what I know from experience, is that there are several different levels of the manifestation. Like you said, everybody differs and how they will display some of these behaviors. What have you seen in your practice, in your history? What have you seen?
Many times it'll show up in acting out, or shifts in emotional levels, like either being more emotional, being more closed off. Behavioral issues are often highlighted. So because it's often a cry for help. So you're going to get help the way you know how to get help. And with youth and young people, their prefrontal cortex, which is our level of logic, is not fully developed. So they're going to be on the more emotional side generally. So just paying attention to any shifts that may occur. And they may also recognizing that they may not have the words to explain what is going on. They just feel it. So meeting them where they are and not expecting them to know what is going on, but helping guide them to where they need to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that, because there are many parents who have concerns, even in their littlest people. You know, they have concerns. They're seeing they're seeing things, especially like you said, and the behavior and the acting out, and they're not certain how to address it or if they should address it. Myself as a mother, I like to err on the side. I'd rather go in or get something checked out and it be totally not anything versus sitting back and watching a progression of behavior and saying, oh, it's just, right? Yeah, so I do understand as a mother and as a father, and even our grandparents who are charged, and our aunts and uncles who are charged with the responsibility of raising children, right? They are, they have concerns.
And I also think healthy emotional expression. We often do not teach our young people how to emote in a healthy way. We either shut off their emotions or we don't teach them how to channel them in ways that can be productive, because our emotions are trying to tell us something about our environment. And when we shut off that emotion, we're basically shutting off communication with the environment. Our emotions tell us if we are in an environment that aligns with what we believe and what we know.
Exactly. That kind of brings me to the thought of ACEs, right? Of adverse childhood experiences, and how the environment and just history overall has shaped some of these issues and some of these barriers, and bringing about some of these triggers and some of these things that we're dealing with. Can you talk about how trigger response affects, I'm trying to find a way to word this directly because I didn't write this one down, but trigger responses. How do you approach, I know you mentioned coping mechanisms. You don't want to take away coping mechanisms right away. You have to make sure see if they're unhealthy or healthy. How do you approach that if they are unhealthy? And how do you help them to lean into and manifest a healthier coping mechanism when they're being triggered?
Well, first you want to offer safety before any intervention, because oftentimes when someone is triggered, they're in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode. So their logic is shut off and they're reactionary. So you want to get them in a space where they can be calm, where they can be level, where they can be grounded. So that often helps by teaching deep breathing. At first, when I was learning deep breathing, I'm like, we all breathe. I don't get it. But what it really does is when we are stressed, we take short breaths, and the short breaths actually constrict the air from reaching our diaphragm and create your heart to increase and your blood to flow from the prefrontal cortex all the way down. And it's hard to be in the moment, and it's hard to think logically. So if you can get someone to calm down to a space where they're grounded, where they can breathe, you can then tap into the logic center of where they are. And triggers really are just showing us areas where we are unhealed. Sometimes triggers are known and sometimes they're not. So if you can get the person to recognize what their trigger is telling them about an unhealed part of them, then you can go into treating it. But if there's not a recognition, it can be very difficult to treat, and the person doesn't have an understanding of why you're asking them to shift and change. So a big part of what I do in practice is providing psychoeducation so that the person understands every step of why the intervention is there, so they can understand if they want to partake in it or not, but they understand what the end result may be if they do it. Because sometimes I see clinicians blindly telling people what to do without explaining how it impacts their presentation, and that usually doesn't bode well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Psychoeducation.
Gotta have it.
Yeah. I'm not gonna break it on down for us a little bit more.
Psychoeducation is just understanding how the brain, body work and interact, how understanding our responses to things, what they're saying about us, what they're saying about our history. Sometimes it can be even epigenetic, and that is trauma passed down through generations. So being able to be aware of what is this trigger telling me? why is it getting me worked up, and how can I shift this so I can be in a healthy place? So the whole purpose of any type of therapeutic intervention is helping you get to optimal health. So that's why I always ask people, how is this helping you, or how is it hurting you, before I even ask them, do you want to shift it? Because sometimes we assume that people want to shift their behaviors, and some people are comfortable in their chaos.
Yes, absolutely. You're right. I am noticing in the midst of this that there are a lot of people who like to operate in chaos, and they like it there.
Because that's what they know.
Yeah. So I'm like, oh, to each his own.
Familiarity, we always we'll go back to comfort, but sometimes comfort is not healthy, and it keeps you from growing and moving forward. And we go back to what we're familiar with. And sometimes people were in environments where chaos was the norm. So peace is a scary thing. Not everybody's seeking it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it looks like, you know what? Girl, you need to tap to epigenetics. It makes me want to go on a whole different level of conversation because that's a whole different topic of discussion regarding mental health. So with that, let's talk about the stigma on mental health, especially in the community of color. Why do you think it is? And what can you offer? I want this to be a breakthrough for someone to say, you know what? I heard her. I need to get help. It's time. I'm going to make that move. I'm going to make that next step in this new year to a healthier me overall. What would you give someone who may have the stigma mindset of mental health in the community of color? What would you tell them?
Vulnerability is strength. Being able to be vulnerable is where you can connect not only with yourself, but with others in an authentic way, without fear of judgment. And I know that's really hard because we feel like we're being judged when we do share our emotions, because when you're vulnerable, that is where you can be judged the most. So finding a safe space to do so, and that's why I often recommend therapy, because it's objective. They're bound by law to not tell anybody, because sometimes with family and friends, they can get gossipy. They may be doing it with good intention, but going to seek the therapy, taking a step of faith, and recognizing where you want to be, maybe not where you are right now, but what do you need to do that? You need change.
Right.
So tapping into that space and being vulnerable and being okay with being vulnerable by taking small steps and recognizing that everybody who lives on this earth at some point in time will experience something in the mental health realm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Chalon, for sharing that. I am adamant about Healthy Thought Gardens. I realize that we have got to operate with a mind that's healthy, because thoughts create what we say. Thoughts create what we do. Thoughts create what we believe and how we move and operate in our daily life. And it is very important that we do that in a healthy manner. I so appreciate you coming on today. Remember, you all, that we have Rainier Avenue Radio News coming up next, so make sure you tap into that. Chalon, you've been amazing. I will see you hopefully soon in the new year. I'd love to have you back on. It would be an honor to have you sit and discuss more about mental health so we can keep it at the forefront in our communities. Happy New Year to all of you. Happy New Year to you, Dr. Chalon. And we actually have a special on Rainier Avenue Radio News that will be starting tomorrow, I believe, at 10 p.m. So make sure you all tune into that. Remember to be kind, gracious to yourself and others. Show people kindness, show people grace, you all. You never know who is hurting in your space. It is a very unprecedented time that we're in. Remember to lead with love. And until next time, I'd love, absolutely love to hear from you all. Mwah. Oh, you can find Dr. Chalon's information on my page, Instagram at Latrice Shanae,
Please join me next time
LatriceShanae.
with the next topic and the next guest that graces us with their presence. In the meantime, be blessed and be gracious and kind to yourself and others. Mwah.